All right, well, welcome everybody to this month's workshop. This month is all about financial goal setting. So I want to thank you for everyone who's joining me today. For those of you who've joined us in the past, for those of you who just started today, welcome. Um, I'm Chris Price. I'm the certified financial planner that does these monthly classes. My main job and objective is to spread education throughout the community, and we do it a lot through these workshops. So, first and foremost, when we do start these workshops, some of the main things that we go over is a term that wasn't founded by myself or my industry, but was founded by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And that's what is financial well-being. Now, basically, if we want to describe what financial well-being is, we could break it down into four pieces. The first one is having control over our day-to-day or month-to-month expenses. The second is having the capacity to absorb a financial shock. God forbid there's something that's unexpected. Can we absorb it? The third one is being on track to meet our financial goals. And the fourth one is having the financial freedom to make choices that you enjoy your life. So, as we review today's discussion on financial goals, we'll be talking in detail about the third bullet point, being on track to meet our financial goals. But we'll also touch on how setting financial goals can help you control over your finances, be able to absorb a financial shock, and lastly, have financial freedom to enjoy one's life. That being said, let's begin. So, today's agenda. We'll spend the rest of today talking about setting financial goals. You may already have financial goals established, and honestly, that's great. So, first, we'll talk about the importance of setting financial goals in general, things you may want to think about when you are setting these goals. Then we'll dive into the rest of today's discussion. Four financial goals you might want to consider establishing for yourself. Within each goal, you'll identify what those goals are. We'll touch on why that goal was chosen, and finally we'll be able to add some suggestions on achieving that goal. So again, everybody is different and everybody will have different financial goals. Our intent here is to simplify and give you reasonable, approachable goals that you can make on your own. So, first and foremost, your financial goals may cover a lot of ground, so they should be prioritized. You may have goals for home ownership, saving for college, or paying off debt, just to name a few. So something you're going to hear people talk about a lot, not just on financial goals, is this term of, are your goals SMART? And it's an easy way for us to remember, are the goals something that can actually happen? So we want to make sure we can define our goals. We want to make sure they're measurable. We want to make sure they're actionable. We want to make sure they're relevant to us, and we want to put a time on them. With these, they're a lot easier to define what our goals will be and how they'll be achieved. This is a great way to make sure our financial goals achieve what we want them to achieve. So, as you set your financial goals, ask yourself these questions. Do your goals refer to a particular dollar amount or a particular percentage, right? Can you name what those goals are? Can you track the progress each month, each year, in each case, right? Do you have a percentage that's going to track that? Can you identify steps that can help you achieve those goals? Does what you're trying to achieve mean something to you? And finally, do your goals have an endpoint? And do you have checkpoints or milestones to see how far you are in those goals? Now, there are things we'd rather like to have, and then there are things that we need to have. So your want goals are things that you'll like to have or achieve, like home ownership, vacations, or new cars. Identifying your wants is a great way to set your financial goals. It's also very fun to think about, right? To do this, simply identify how much money you'll need to get started. Then get your want or set a time frame, which then to do it, and then determine what it will take to get there. So let's use an example. So let's say you want to accumulate $15,000 for a down payment on a purchase of a home in 5 years. You could simply take that $15,000, divide by 60 months, let's just say, and find out that you need to save $250 each month Of course, this doesn't take into effect consideration, compound interest or market growth or anything like that, but we can see how we can take that goal, that SMART goal. We could define it by time. We could define it by amount. We could see how it's relevant to us. We can see those milestones we need to get there. We can measure those. We could break that down. Another way to approach financial goal setting is around your financial concerns, right? That's more on the concern side. These concerns are things that really keep you up at night, like paying bills, eliminating debt, or having enough for retirement. I will be honest with you, as someone who financially sets goals for myself, I like setting goals for the want, not so much for the concerns, but you need that mix to complete your financial picture and your financial plan. Oh. So a study done by MassMutual identifies income, savings, retirement, and debt as America's most prolific financial concerns. So just keep that in consideration when you feel like you have some concerns. Most Americans find these are their biggest concerns. In case you're unsure what your financial goals should be, we're going to highlight today potential goals that you can consider establishing. We're going to use a simple 5, 10, 15, 20 guideline, and it's going to detail which goals are which goals are for what. And if you don't have a goal for this particular bucket, maybe you could use this. Now, the one disclosure I want to say is goals should be unique to yourself, your family, your wants, your current concerns, your needs. This is a guideline for those that may not have it. By no means is a recommendation of what you should have. But let's take these 4 financial goals. Let's take the number 5, right? Increase your annual income by 5% each year. We'll talk about that. The 10, we want to save at least 10% of our net annual income each year. So after they take out taxes from your paycheck, after you give to your 401k, after you do all this stuff, the money you get in your paycheck, 10% from that. 15, plan a retirement nest egg that's 15 times your annual income. And 20, plan to have your debt eliminated within 20 years. The exact numbers may not be for everyone, as we talked about, but for many of you, this can help you get your bearings, get started. The most important thing is to set your financial goals and get started. 5, 10, 15, 20, maybe just the right nudge. You need to get started. Cool. So, setting an income goal. So let's start with income. Set a goal and increase your income by 5%. And I'll admit, it seems kind of daunting. It seems like something outside of your control, but maybe we could change it. Maybe it's closer than we think. First, before I get that, I want to kind of explain how big of a difference this will actually make. On your screen right now, you see a chart of a 30-year-old that makes $75,000 a year. They enjoy a 2%, consistent 2% increase of income every single year. Well, in that particular case, they're going to save just over about $4 million. I'm sorry, they're going to earn just over $4 million in their lifetime by the time they reach age 67. Now, that's a great amount of money, but what if we can increase that a little bit, right? What if we can increase it by 3% or 4% or even 5%? Now let's look at our chart and consider a 5% increase to our income instead of that 2% increase. For that same 30-year-old who is making $75,000 a year, and an annual increase of 5% can lead to a potential additional $3.5 million of income over their lifetime. So this is a big reason why you'll see people push towards this every year, just having a little 5%, little 5%, little 5%. So setting a goal for your income is critically important, because your income will provide you with the means that you need to reach other financial goals. And we're going to touch on those a little bit more, but these are the means to reach it. So what are some of the ways we could increase our income by 5%? So we're not saying you need to go out there and find a second job, but there are things that you could do to help increase that income from month to month. But let's start by getting rid of some expenses. The main one, let's talk about tax exposure. Right? So can we minimize our tax exposure to increase our take-home amount? Right? Consider overtime pay, which depending on what you're making may not be taxable, or something of that nature. Right? So we could also maybe talk about participating in what they call the sharing economy. Meaning, is there a room to rent, items we could sell, rides we can give? And how about a hobby or a passion that you can monetize without making an excess investment or taking on too much risk or too much time? Those last 2 points are very important for two reasons. One, chasing your dreams and getting it paid for is a great way to expand your horizon. You could even make a career out of it. And two, should a work interruption happen or something nature to take you out of your primary job, it would still make sense to have something to fall back on. Cool. Let's talk about setting a savings goal. Now, there are different types of savings, including your personal savings and your retirement savings. In this next section, we're going to focus on the personal savings, and then after this, the retirement savings. And we definitely want to separate the two because they are quite different. Right? The money that you save for retirement in your retirement accounts is generally pre-tax or post-tax, depending what you're doing, and often comes directly out of your paycheck. But your personal savings are generally built on post-tax dollars, meaning money you get in your bank account. It's the money you take home. It's the money you're going to use to set aside for things like buying a house, budgeting, things of that nature. So when setting any goal for yourself, you want to prioritize which is most important, like we talked about earlier. So by setting a goal of 10% of your take-home pay and allocating a percentage of those dollars, each of your savings portion gives you a better chance of reaching that savings goal. That's because you're more willing to allocate if you understand what that budget might be. So if you were to look at your screen, you could kind of see what those factors might be. Are you saving to increase your emergency account? Maybe it's home ownership. Maybe it's a vacation. Maybe it's college education for your kids. So this is just basically taking that concept we said earlier today about prioritizing, analyzing, and visualizing our goals and adding it towards our savings. Now let's use an example, right? When I say that 10%, it could seem a little daunting, right? So let's use an example of that same 30-year-old who's making $75,000 gross a year. And let's assume that 25% of their income is going to tax, or they have a 25% tax rate, which honestly is a little high for someone making that money, but we could use that. The person's take-home pay would roughly be about just over $56,000. At a 10% savings rate, they would need to save about $5,600 a year, or only about $469 per month. So in our hypothetical person saving $469 each month, as you see in your screen, for the next 37 years, let's say they're earning a small conservative rate of return of 5%, they would almost save about $600,000 additionally at retirement without even talking about the retirement account. Now, of course, you're going to be saving money along the way. You're going to be spending money along the way. You're going to have priorities like home ownership, college education, vacation. So this money may get used, but just understand how much extra it is for how little you're putting away over a long period of time. Now, if you're thinking, okay, I'm that 30-year-old, I'm making about $75,000. I don't know if I have another $460 to put away. There are ways to reach that. Maybe we can participate in that gig economy, get a little bit raised, and get maybe about an extra $230 a month. But then we can also find $230 a month in expenses and things that we don't need to spend every month. So there are ways to achieve that. I will tell you this when it comes to saving. I don't care if you make 50 grand, 75 grand, 150 grand, 250 grand, and so on and so on. Every person I talk to, they always say, hey, if I only made a little bit more, if I only made a little bit more. So let's figure out how we can get it to work with the money we're making and hope we get that bigger raise. So it's important to be aware of how some of our habits kind of hurt our savings. We're going to use the methodology that most of you have probably heard and everyone's kind of used is how much the average cup of coffee actually ends up costing you. So there's a study done back in 2019, so a little outdated, saying a cup of coffee was $2.99. So if you bought one cup of coffee every day, that's about $20 a week. It's about $83 a month and just over $1,000 a year. Over a 10-year period, you spend $10,000 on coffee alone. So I know the coffee example is something that's been played out and done a million times, but that's because of how much we actually spend on something that sometimes doesn't mean as much to us in our day-to-day life. So the first step, obviously, is to create a budget. The second step And I think one of the more important steps is to look at automatically directing a portion of your paycheck into a savings account. Don't even think about it. Don't even look about it. This is key because the money goes directly into a savings account and you quickly adjust with, hey, I have less to live on. So it's key. Third is identify savings vehicles that may yield you higher. If they are yielding you higher, move into them, given the risk tolerance. Another consideration not listed here is to take advantage of discounts or loyalty programs offered by many, many companies and retail stores out there. It's amazing how $5 here, $5 here, $10 here can save you based on those loyalty programs. Cool. So now let's talk about setting a retirement goal. Now, I want to, as everyone on this call has ever sat down with me knows, is I probably work for every 10 clients that sits down, 8 is all around retirement. So I want to preface by using this number that your retirement number is unique to you and you alone. This is general information that was produced for the general population, has nothing to do with who you are, what you're trying to accomplish. So take everything here as that. I highly recommend everyone sits down with an individual, with a professional, and understands what their number is. With that being said, let's talk about this generic general information. So, big question we get is, how big does your retirement nest egg have to be? Now, how much depends, like I said, totally on yourself. And we hear things all over the internet. We hear people say you need 10 times your income, you need 25 times your income. One of the rules of thumbs we're going to use here is 15 times your annual income. And the reason we're going to use this as a good rule of thumb is because we're going to assume it takes 75% of the money you make right now to live on a year in retirement. And that's just because we're not saving for retirement. We sometimes don't need to transfer back to work. So about 75% of what you're making now. So that's where we come up with this 15 times. Let's do some math behind it. Let's say we had this 15 times, right? So let's say that we assume that you're going to grow this 15 times, you're going to grow at 5% annual growth on this nest egg. Right? That 5% growth would be the income you're going to receive, which would equate to that 75%. So I want everyone to kind of keep that focus. That's saying that, hey, we have this big bucket. It's making 5% a year. We're spending the 5%, but yet we haven't touched our money. I think most of us know that when we get to retirement, or must know somebody when they get to retirement, they're using more of their nest egg and it is going down. So again, this is for general conversation, not exactly for everyone. So if we did a little example based on this here, let's say we're that person making $75,000 a year. If we times that by 15, that equals $1,125,000 in that nest egg. If it's growing by 5% a year, it would be roughly $56,000 a year, which, if we saw what those numbers were earlier, was the amount that person was receiving after taxes. It equates to about 75% of that person's current income. So this formula works no matter what your income is, as you can imagine, but I do want to emphasize that this dollar amount is for just a general statement, not particular to you. So setting retirement goal. What else should we consider? So the size of your nest egg will also depend on the number of other factors, including your investment portfolio or profile, I should say. Are you a conservative investor? Are you an aggressive one? Right? The amount of time you have before retirement will help determine your overall financial risk profile. Right? Your qualified retirement accounts like your 401ks or IRAs provide you with tax deferral growth. In many instances, the employer matches. Social Security will also provide you with one form of income retirement. Take these dollars into an account. So again, all these factors are reasons why it's unique to you, not that general number. So last but not least, let's talk about setting a debt payment goal. So if debt is a problem for you, don't worry, you're not alone. According to NerdWallet, the survey conducted, the average U.S. household carries about $15,000 in credit card debt. The ones that have automotive loans, it's about $28,000, and the ones that have student loans, it's about $47,000. So with those numbers, no wonder why this is a feat that might seem overwhelming. So now let's discuss setting financial goals for your debt. Our goal is going to be to be debt-free within 20 years. Again, just like retirement, this is super unique, super unique. It depends on interest rates. It depends on where you are in life. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Depends on what your savings is. There are so many factors that go into this that 20 years may be very hard for someone to do, or maybe too easy for someone to do. So just take all this into consideration. The whole focus of today is to get you to set your own financial goals, create your own plan to it. Need some help along the way, let us know. But these numbers are generic, general statements. So debt is all about balance. And without a plan in place, it quickly spirals out of control and it affects your other goals. But by having a plan in place, you can exercise control over your finances and be better equipped to meet your goals from now and into the future. So first thing is understanding what kind of debt that you have. What are the interest rates? What are the terms? What is it structured on? Is there a balloon payment? Understanding how this debt is structured is the first goal in coming up with a plan to get it paid off. And understanding the difference between what they call good and bad debt. I would argue that there should be a term called good or bad debt. It all depends on what you're accomplishing, what you're doing. No, a lot of times we would say student loans are a good debt because it provided you with the education and knowledge that we needed to succeed. Maybe that's not the case, all right? We can also say that credit cards are bad debt because the interest rate is super high and we don't need the things we bought with it. Maybe that's not the case either. So again, understanding your debt and that term good, bad, maybe a mix in a gray area that we didn't talk about today. So once we develop a plan to tackle our debt, you'll see pretty quickly how it's going and if it needs to be adjusted. If you're happy with it, hopefully it's going to get you out of debt. And then the question is, because you should answer this before, but once you pay off one of those debts, what do you do with the extra money? Does it go towards that savings that we maybe neglected? Does it go to pay off other debts? Does it go to our retirement nest egg because we're below that number we want to hit based on the goal we set? So let's review. We talked about increasing our income. We talked about retirement planning, savings, debt. For those of you who don't have numbers, we using SMART goals, and we simply said 5, 10, 15, 20 guidelines, right? It basically said, let's increase our annual income by 5% a year. Let's save at least 10% of our net annual income each year. Let's target for a retirement nest egg of 15% of our annual income. And let's make a plan to get out of debt within 10 years. Again, I can't stress this enough. These exact numbers may not be for everyone, but for many of you, they can help at least you to get bearings on what you should, what you shouldn't, what others are hearing. For those of you who have questions on how some of these goals should be structured, how the milestones should be, or what your numbers should be, let us know. We'll talk to you. You could use the QR code on the screen to give us advice on what things we should bring into the future, or maybe if you need some questions answered, we'll definitely address them there. I want to thank everyone for being part of this live workshop, and I'll talk to you guys soon.